So without further ado, let me introduce Ron James.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. So first of all, just a little bit about what I'm going to talk about. I wanted to first start with the financial aid application process, just to give you just a little bit of high points, because I want to spend most of my time talking about things that I think you should do to prepare for financing and paying for your medical school in order to come up with the best possible outcome as it concerns your finances. So with that said, first off, financial aid. Financial aid for graduate education, a lot different than financial aid for undergraduate educations. And so most of you have some familiarity with undergraduate, and you'll note that there are federal financial aid programs. Entitlement programs is what we call them. And I always like to say that there are no federal entitlement programs available for graduate education, for medical school. So there is no federal Pell Grant, nothing equivalent to that for graduate education. And generally speaking, there are no state-supported grant programs that are generally available to undergraduates, equally available to graduate students. These kinds of entitlement programs just don't exist. And I always start by saying that to say that what might be different for you pursuing graduate education at this point, pursuing medical school, would be student loans. Student loans will become a part of your world if they are not already a part of your world in terms of financing your education from now forward. Not to say that there aren't grant programs available, free money available for medical school education. There is, but the lion's share of what's available at the local level on the campuses are grant money that's designed for needy students. So most campuses are going to engage you in the application process with the idea of trying to determine how to best allocate their need-based funds, their need-based grant money. Okay, so you do have to complete the FAFSA, the federal form, same as what you're used to doing right now or accustomed to doing for undergraduate studies. So you will complete a FAFSA for medical school financial aid. You will do so as soon as you possibly can after January 1st, prior to when you're going to start medical school. We don't want you to wait until after you're admitted to start the application process for financial aid. That's a no-no. So you're going to complete the FAFSA as soon as you can after January 1st, because any medical school out there is going to require it. What's different from medical school to medical school is the requirement of parent information, and that's whether or not they require it, whether they do or not. Most medical schools do require parent information in order to determine some component of your eligibility, to determine how to best allocate their need-based dollars. They're going to want to make sure that money goes to the neediest students. What I failed to mention before, I'm going to back up a little bit in the sense that when you apply for medical school financial aid, you are an independent student for federal aid. So that unlike undergraduate, your parents' information might not be required on the FAFSA in order to meet the requirements of your school. However, schools will want to collect parent information in order to determine eligibility for this need-based campus or local grant money that I spoke of that's available. So despite independent student status, you might have to provide your parents' information. Some schools will require parent information on the FAFSA, so you might continue to complete parent information on the FAFSA, but most schools will require it on a form, a secondary form. At UCSF, where I work, we require something called the College Scholarship Service Profile, sometimes called the Financial Aid Profile. We require that to collect your parents' information. We don't use the FAFSA for reasons pretty much due to the fact that we collect more information on the FAFSA, on the profile, that we need to determine eligibility for this need-based fund, these need-based dollars. Now, why do we collect parent information despite the fact that you are an independent student for federal aid? We do this because despite your relationship with your parents right now, despite whether they support you or you live with them, we need to look at your family's financial background to determine how to best allocate the need-based dollars that we have available for our students. We are a public institution, so we have limited grant money, so we just want to make sure the neediest students actually receive those funds. That might not be the case if you're actually attending a private institution. So whether parent information is required or not, and for what purposes it's required really depends on the school that you are attending. So any questions from the audience?
Does your parents' financial status have any hold on your admission to the university?
His question was if his parents' information, or does parent information have any impact on your admit status? Not at UCSF, and I highly doubt it at any other medical school. Generally speaking, what I'm hearing is that the parents' financial position or situation is not having an impact on your admission to medical school. However, when it comes to your financial aid eligibility, your parents' financial information is going to have some impact on what kind of financial aid we can offer you, what kind of assistance we can offer you. I think the thing to remember about this process is that when it comes to determining how much money you receive, the dollar amount of funding you receive, that's based on the fact that you simply present at a medical school as an admitted student. You live off campus, you're going to get your total costs funded by that institution. But when it comes to how your costs are funded, that's when your parents' information might factor into the equation. We need to determine how to best utilize need-based resources on our campuses. One more question and then I'll have to move on.
Just to make sure, so if we're going to apply to medical school like this upcoming summer, then we need to file the FAFSA this January?
Her question is about the timing of filing a FAFSA. What one should do is be certain to file a FAFSA as soon as possible after January 1st, prior to when you start medical school, despite your admit status. It's really important that you not wait until you're admitted to initiate the application process for financial aid. You definitely don't want to do that. So as soon as you can after January 1, you're going to file the FAFSA, which is an online form. And then as soon as you start to interview, I would imagine you're going to want to actually go a little bit deeper than the FAFSA and find out what other application requirements exist for these schools that you're interviewing at. And it certainly wouldn't hurt at this point if you're looking at your top choices of places that your heart tells you you really want to go. Look at their processes right now. That information is on our websites at UCSF. Our website URL, finaid.ucsf.edu. You can go to our website right now and check out that application process and what you'll need to do beyond the FAFSA. Definitely want you to do that. So unless there are any other, one other thing I failed to mention about the parent information. Some medical schools will have an age threshold. And what I mean by that is that if you are that age or older, then they will not require your parents' information to get the best possible funding consideration. That is not true at UCSF. We don't have an age threshold for our medical students. So that means that if you present on our campus, no matter how old you are, we will want the information from your parents in order to get your application the best possible consideration for funding. okay? I don't think I need to mention the importance of meeting deadlines, but I will mention that nonetheless. But generally speaking, if you're doing everything that your institution requires as soon as you can after January 1st, because that's the soonest you can actually complete a FAFSA, then you're going to be okay. You're going to be okay. But the point is, don't wait until after you're admitted to start this process. Because trust me, you're going to be in a hurry to get information about your financial aid eligibility as soon as you're admitted. And if it's a top choice for you, you're going to want to know about your financial aid offer. So get that application done before you're admitted. Don't wait. Okay. Okay, if there are no other questions, I want to move on to this idea of planning, some things that I want you to do beyond applying for financial aid. I think first and foremost is to take a look at the monthly cost of living allowance that's used to determine eligibility at your schools. The schools that you get an interview from in particular. You're going to want to find out from that school just how much money will be included to determine your financial aid eligibility. How much will you receive to cover your living costs? Because those are the costs that you have control over. You have no control over your tuition and fees. You have little control, although some, of books and supplies. But generally speaking, the one thing that you can control is the monthly cost of living. So find out from your schools what that number is. It's really important then that you take that information and you look at your reality and you make sure that your reality best fits that cost of living allowance. You make sure you can live within that cost of living allowance, because if you're going to rely 100% on financial aid to cover your expenses, then you're going to be bound by a student budget, which includes that cost of living allowance. And you won't be able to make ends meet if your reality, your real monthly expenses are in excess of what the school will allow in your student budget. So one of the handouts includes the living allowance, the monthly living allowance for UCSF. If you can look at that, you can note the items listed there, and it's this piece right here. And if you don't have, I think there's some more, you can pass those back. And nonetheless, we want you to look at that monthly living allowance, and you'll notice that there's no line item for credit card expenses, no line item for consumer debt. Those are items that I want to caution you about before you actually get to medical school. You're going to want to have a plan to make certain that you come to medical school free of consumer debt, if you possibly can. It's going to be really, really difficult to manage on a financial aid budget unless you do that. So if you're having problems with credit cards right now, one positive step in the right direction would be to stop using them. But come with a plan to pay those down before you get to medical school. And if not, just realize that that living allowance that's in your student budget might not be quite enough. Now, the monthly allowance that I show in this example is an off-campus student that shares accommodations with at least one other student, and you're going to find that most institutions, that's what they're going to be providing you with. A single student who lives off campus and shares with someone else. That's the model. If you live with parents, you're not going to get a rent allowance in your student budget, of course, because you live with your parents. If you happen to live on campus, there might be some adjustment to your monthly living allowance to determine your eligibility for financial aid. Okay. We go through great pains with that living allowance. We want to make absolutely sure it's something that works. And I can honestly tell you that, no matter how ridiculous it might look at first glance to some of you who may be not living like a student right now, if you engage properly before you get to medical school, you're going to work out a plan to make that work out for yourself, because we don't take this number very lightly. We do a lot of research to get that number and to get it right for our students. Now, if you're coming to a campus with a family, if you're going to have other people to support, then you're going to want to come with a plan that, that doesn't include relying on financial aid, the financial aid office to help you pay for those expenses. Federal student aid dollars and in most cases institutional dollars won't be given to you to help you pay for your family members' expenses. So if you come to us married with an unemployed spouse, that's going to be a particularly difficult kind of situation because your expenses will certainly be higher than those of a single student. But come to us with a plan for managing that. Now, at any medical school campus, you're going to find that there will be some exceptions. There are exceptions to every rule. And I would strongly suggest that you see the rules, you read the websites and so on and so forth, but I cannot overemphasize the idea that you ask questions and present your unusual set of circumstances or present your questions to the financial aid office. Don't just take the printed matter as set in stone. There are exceptions to every rule, I always say. In the matter of the living allowance, we're going to help you pay for things like your child care expenses. We're going to help you pay for uninsured medical or dental expenses. At most campuses, you're going to actually be required to have medical insurance, and that's something that you're probably going to actually pay for as a part of your tuition and fees cost. And it's not always the case that that's satisfactory. So financial aid office is definitely going to help you pay for your uninsured expenses. So don't be afraid to ask us questions. The other planning beyond, well, first of all, before I move forward, cost of living. Any questions about cost of living? It's always based on the months you're enrolled in school. I think I should also point out that for periods of time that you're not enrolled in school, let's say the summer between first and second year at UCSF, our curriculum allows the summer free. The summer is also free of financial aid in the sense that if you're not enrolled, we can't help you pay for expenses while you're enrolled in school. So you're going to keep those kinds of things in mind as you plan. Okay? If you have prior student loans, before you get to medical school, it's very, very important that you actually take stock of your student loan debt, where you are right now. If you're not at all sure about the level of your existing loan debt, you're going to want to go to the federal website. It's called nslds.ed.gov. And that's a federal site. That's the place where you go to pull up your loan history. Your federal loan history exists on that website. Even loans that you've paid off, paid in full in the past, that status should be reflected on the website. So look at that before you get to medical school. The reason for that is just not only to make you aware, because you really should be aware, and I think there's a tendency to sign on a dotted line and accept the payments as you go along and just generally not be aware. So it's really important to be aware of where you are before you start medical school. But we also want you to be in a position to make sure your institutions or your lenders or holders of your student loans know where you are when you start medical school, because as you begin medical school, you should not be making student loan payments while you're enrolled in school. So that's not a burden to you while you're enrolled in school. So if you're going to be in a position to make sure all your lenders are contacted and so on. Any questions about that? Yes, ma'am. Can you repeat the website's URL? N as in Nancy, S as in Sam, L as in Larry, D as in David, and S as in Sam, .ed.gov. nslds.ed.gov, federal website. Definitely want you to take a look at that before you get to medical school. So, scholarships. I talked about this need-based grant scholarship money. Again, keyword need-based. Get your parents' information, we look at your financial information, and we determine eligibility, need-based. We want you to do the best, make the best effort you can before you get to medical school at applying for merit-based scholarships, for outside scholarships. And I think one of the best ways to do that is the internet, or what can be one of the best ways is the internet. Going online to engage scholarship search engines. Now, there are some links on the webpage, our webpage at UC San Francisco. Again, finaid.ucsf.edu. That's our website, and we have a link to scholarship information there and search engines that we think are appropriate for health professions, campuses. So we want you to go there and check that out. When you go to when you go online to do scholarship search engines, you're going to encounter some advertisement. You're going to encounter some offers to perhaps identify scholarships on your behalf for a fee. And I would caution you to maybe stay, well not maybe, but certainly I think stay away from fee-for-service type offers, because generally speaking there's not much they can do beyond what you can do for yourself to determine appropriate scholarships to apply for. Use those search engines, use people like myself to get proper direction on applying for scholarships. Any scholarship you bring to the table will reduce the loan component of your financial aid award. So it's really, really important that you make an effort at scholarships before getting to medical school. The appropriate time to actually start doing this activity is now. You can start now. You might be a junior or a sophomore, maybe not quite ready to apply for scholarships, but you might find out about something now that might look appropriate for you 2 years or a year down the road. Note that. You can get back to it. You might do a scholarship search a couple of years from now and for some reason might not stumble on that same scholarship that might yet exist still. So anything you can find out about now might be helpful a couple of years from now. So I would suggest you do that. Generally speaking, the scholarship season, so to speak, happens between October and April, going into the following, the upcoming year, prior to your start in medical school. But any scholarship you bring to the table reduces that loan component of your financial aid award once again. So it's really important for you to try to bring as much scholarship to the table as you possibly can. That means borrowing less money. Borrowing less money. Loan repayment, loan forgiveness programs. There is such a thing, or there are loan repayment, loan forgiveness programs, and what they are designed to do is to allow students to have a portion, or maybe in some cases all, of your student loan debt forgiven or repaid on your behalf in exchange for service of some kind, okay? Again, I keep mentioning our website, Student Financial Aid at UCSF, because I think we have some pretty good information out there, but we do have information on loan repayment programs on our site. You can visit us and find that out, find some direction there. There's one federal program that is new, relatively new on the streets, and it's a public service loan forgiveness program that I think that you should take a look at, and it's no harm in looking at it now. You can't actually benefit by the program until you go into repayment once you finish medical school as you start your residency, but certainly the loan forgiveness and loan repayment programs are things that you want to look at right now to see what's out there and prepare yourselves for applying for those programs. Do you have any questions about that? Yes, ma'am.
Would that include like working at an underdeveloped, not underdeveloped, but for example, Round Mountain in Northern California? if you work for them for a certain amount of time, you can get loan forgiven. So is that what you're talking
Yeah,
about?
her question was specific to a particular program, particular area here in Northern California. But yes, that's generally what I'm talking about. Basically, what happens with loan forgiveness programs, and if you go to our website, we actually have it divided by profession, so that you have programs specifically targeting medical students, programs targeting dentistry, programs targeting physical therapy or nursing. And then, of course, we have the overarching or the general federal program, the Public Service Loan Forgiveness Program. There's the National Health Services Corps, Health Services, I'm getting that wrong, HRSA, the National Health Services Corps. In any case, go to our website, fin8.ucsf.edu. I'm having trouble here recalling acronyms, but that information about the specifics are all there, but that's the type of program we're talking about, yes.
Mr. James, there's a question that's come in over the Twitter feed about other ways of reducing the amount of debt that you have to take on as a student. And you mentioned scholarships as one. Is there an opportunity to work during medical school and thereby bring in some income and hopefully reduce the amount of loan that you would take on?
It's an interesting question. So that generally speaking, medical students are in curriculums that require you not to work. We certainly have a work-study program at UCSF, and there are some medical schools some other medical schools that also participate in that program, and we will make that program available to you. And what work-study is an opportunity for you to earn money while enrolled in school, and that earning, those earnings will actually reduce the loan component of your financial aid. So that is a way to borrow less working while enrolled in school, but it's just not advisable in most medical school programs. Now, before you get to medical school, all the way up to the summer before you start through the summer before you start medical school, you can work as much as your energy and your schedule would allow, and generally not have that income affect your financial aid while enrolled in school. And I point that out because it enables you an opportunity to come in with some savings that will enable you not to borrow as much during your first year out. You will use your savings to cover some component of some portion of your expenses while enrolled in school. So it's certainly no prohibition before you get to us in earning as much as you possibly can, because that's just going to make life much better for you as you start the program. One of the things I failed to mention this makes me think about the idea of startup costs. Before you start medical school, if you're going to be relocating especially, those costs that you incur before actually arriving on campus won't be things that the school can help you pay for. The federal student loans won't be available for that, nor will the institutional dollars be available for that. So really important for you to work and save as much as you can so you can offset those expenses and not have that have an effect on your ability to manage your school year expenses once you start the program. Her question was the window within which financial aid won't be affected. In terms of earnings, when we look at your application for financial aid, we're looking at your school year reality to determine how much you will contribute towards earnings. So generally speaking, what you earn from January 1 before getting to us through the end of the summer, won't have an effect on your eligibility, those earnings. The earnings you realize in the prior tax year won't necessarily have an effect either, because that's certainly not money that we expect you to have available a year later when you start school, or actually a year and a half later when you start school. Okay? I'm confusing you.
Well, it seems like the previous tax year, isn't that what would be on the FAFSA? You fill out that.
Right. The previous tax year is on the FAFSA. And the previous tax year in our world is essentially, as far as earnings are concerned, that's discounted. We don't look at that to determine how much you're going to contribute while enrolled in school, because we're going to look at your reality. Your school year reality would dictate that you're not going to be able to work while enrolled in school. The whole premise of this student contribution calculated based on the prior year is based on the idea that you're going to somehow continue to work while enrolled in school. And so what we do on our individual campuses on a case-by-case basis, make allowances for students who are in curriculums that prohibit them from working, that have limitations on their ability to work. And so we're definitely going to account for that. And generally, for medical students, we don't expect them to contribute anything from earnings, unless they have a working or a spouse. There's going to be a contribution from that spouse's earnings. And the other unless or qualification of what I just said is your assets. Because if a student comes to us with assets of their own, then those assets might have implications, might equate to less eligibility for need-based financial aid. Does that answer your question? Okay.
Mr. James, there's a question that came in a little earlier about what happens to your financial aid application if you are ultimately not accepted into medical school. If you reapply, do you have to start the financial aid application process over again, or can you start from where you left off?
You have to begin again. And that's because you have to apply for financial aid every year. Reapply every January 1st, and that would apply to the student who wasn't admitted in their first time out. Yeah, so they'd have to reapply. Yes?
Going back to the allowance for housing, on this sheet that you provided, is that just specific to the San Francisco area? Because that's where, so any other school would have a different.
That's a great question. Her question was regarding a handout I have here about the cost of living allowance, and does that apply to just the San Francisco Bay Area? And yes, it does. This was designed to accommodate our students on our campus, and I just gave you this as an example of what you might encounter on other campuses that you're considering. I wanted to give you an idea because it's a really important area to focus on, because that's the place where you have the best chance of reducing your costs while enrolled in school, is your cost of living, your monthly living costs. And of course, and certainly, if you're going to rely 100% on financial aid, this bears repeating, if you're going to rely 100% on financial aid, you're going to want not to spend more than what the student budget will allow. Because if you do, that means one or two things is going to happen. You're going to be using your credit cards to pay for the difference, if you're spending more, or you're gonna get further and further behind, and maybe you might even borrow private educational loans, which will increase the magnitude of your student loan debt in repayment, and you certainly don't want to do that. So we want you to come to us as free as possible of prior consumer debt, so that you can manage on this living allowance. So when you go to your interviews, that's probably the best time to find this information. Is when you go to your interviews, you need to ask them, what monthly cost of living allowance will be used in my financial aid budget? Because that will tell you how much they're allowing you to spend. And if they can't find that information for you, then I would say that's a void maybe in their um, processes or information to interviewing students, but generally speaking, you should be able to find it on their website if they don't actually hand it to you at some point during your interview day about the living allowance. I would say that from what I know of my colleagues out there and what I know about living costs in general, San Francisco's 2014 is probably comparable to some of the East Coast institutions' living allowances. Let's say some places in New York, a medical school in Manhattan, I would imagine, might have a living allowance that's comparable to ours from what I know of cost of living. And that would be the case in maybe some schools in Massachusetts as well. But find out what the reality is. This is probably a good point to mention also an opportunity to reduce student loan debt because this whole idea is that this is an allowance. If you live off campus, the school's going to give it to you because they're going to offer you student loans as well as grants if you qualify. You're going to accept or decline them. The idea here is that if you live off campus, you have flexibility. You're going to try to find a place to live that doesn't cost as much as what the school is allowing. You're going to try to survive on eating less. We allow our students $500 per month. That's quite generous according to many students I talk to. So these are opportunities for you to say, I don't want that loan, I don't need that much. Reduce the $10,000 to $5,000 instead. Those kinds of things are going to mean a lot down the road in terms of your life during residency and beyond when it comes to student loan repayment. So that's really important to try to spend less.
Mr. James, I'm glad you brought that up because there's a saying that I've heard on occasion: don't live like a doctor when you're a medical student, so that you don't have to live like a medical student when you're a doctor.
Exactly.
Can you you've talked a little bit about how you can keep costs in during medical school. Can you talk a little bit about the real implications of assuming certain levels of debt for beyond medical school and what that means in terms of repayment and budgeting and how that impacts someone's financial solvency in residency and beyond?
Big question. Okay. Well, I don't have any statistics necessarily on the implications of student loan debt. Let's say, let's start with the average loan debt at UCSF, for example. The average student loan debt at UCSF is $106,000 or so. At least that was the average for our class that graduated this past June. And again, that's an average. Okay, that's an average. We had students who had debt that exceeded a couple of $100,000 per month. Every little bit that you can do in terms of reducing your student loan debt is going to affect the monthly payment outcome down the road. If you spend, let's say, if you're able over the course of your life at UCSF, for example, able to borrow $5,000 less than we offer you, that's going to represent in repayment of your student loan down the road a savings of about $34,000-$35,000 in repayment, and I consider that pretty huge because most of these loans you're going to be repaying your student loans over a period of anywhere from 10 to 25 years after you leave medical school. Now, the average repayment period actually for medical student loan debt is about 10 years. So it's actually the repayment term is actually pretty low. But I'm not doing a good job at answering that question.
Let me ask a question then about how to minimize debt on the front end, so that you don't have to worry about repaying massive amounts on the back end. What goes into consideration for merit-based scholarships? Is it a consideration of grades, MCAT score, GPA transcript? What goes into consideration for merit-based scholarships?
All of those things. And beyond, there will be personal statements that will have to be written. There will be questions that will have to be answered, and they have a wide range. I think you're gonna, in the application process for medical school, actually write quite a bit of text about yourself. And I always tell students to recycle that for use with some of these applications for scholarship, merit-based scholarships. And a lot of times, while based on merit, scholarships are also based on other criteria related to just who you are, where you live, your ethnicity. There are just a number of requirements like that. When you do go online and do a scholarship search, you're going to complete a profile about yourself that's going to ask you several questions like this. And among those would be the general accepted merit type considerations. I would say to any student applying for a scholarship, though, despite the magnitude of work that might be involved in applying for a scholarship, you're going to want to commit the time and effort into completing the process if you believe you have a really good match, despite the possible gain. Because when you look at the merit-based scholarships, I've seen them range anywhere from as little as $500 to as much as several $1,000s. And I just know what the mindset is out there right now, and you're probably looking at the 500 and you're looking at the $53,000 budget for your first year and saying it's not worth the effort. But in fact, any little bit that you do up front to reduce the student loan debt is going to matter quite a bit down the road. And I always tell students that even if you win a $500 scholarship after completing a 20-page application, that means you won that scholarship, and it's a win that you're going to put on the next application. It's a win that you're going to list on your resume that's going to make you ultimately perhaps more competitive for something else down the road, some other honor that may or may not have some financial reward. So the little ones do count, and so I would just strongly impress upon you guys to pursue those little matches as well as the possibly larger ones. Just one thing, along the lines of that question about how to minimize debt, what we don't want to happen to you is you bring consumer debt to the table, you bring a car payment, and you decide that since financial aid won't help me, I'm going to borrow some private loan money. There's a private market in educational loans and that you can access. And you might be able to get a private loan outside of the financial aid that you get from your institution, but that comes with a variable interest rate that might be low right now, and it also comes with or maybe not with, actually, it comes absent the same terms that you have on your federal student loans. And we talked about this whole idea of loan repayment and loan forgiveness. Well, guess what? If you have private educational loans in your portfolio, those private loans aren't going to count on the loan forgiveness, loan repayment side. They won't be considered in those programs. So you're going to want to stay away from the private loan programs. A little off topic, but I wanted to definitely make that point.
Well, it sounds like none of us are going to get, or very few of us are going to get our medical education for free.
Exactly.
But we've gotten some great advice from Ron James today, and unfortunately we need to wrap. So I want to thank him for his time and expertise, and for sharing with us some great insight and great advice for minimizing the debt burden that we have to take on in order to pursue our medical education. So let's thank him.